Hello, and welcome to Conversations Worth Your While, a show in which I chat with the really cool people about interesting topics to spark, inspire, and motivate personal and professional change. And today's topic is Be a Better Leader Today. And this conversation is worth your while if you'd love to be a better leader today, starting today, but you don't have the time to research leadership, or maybe leadership by trial and error hasn't been working for you, and you want an in depth understanding of leadership because it's important for you and for your team and for your organization to be effective. And every second, you get a chance and a choice of where to put your energy. So let's put it today into being a better, more effective leader. And today, what we're going to cover is why situational leadership, and that means fitting your leadership style to the situation, isn't always the answer or the only answer, and why it doesn't always work. We're also going to talk about, are leaders born or are they made? Do you have to be a natural born leader to be effective, or can you develop as a leader? And then we're going to share with you something that will work for every leader in every situation. And I know that sounds intriguing, so stay with us. Let's start with some introductions. I'm Linda Bucher. I'm a heart centered master coach, a mindset mentor, a transformative speaker, and an author. And if you are excited about making a positive impact of the world, and you feel that there's this bigness inside of you, and you want to do more, be more, and have more joy, more fun, more balance, and more impact, then you want to connect with me, and I will help you to unleash that bigness inside of you and give your gifts to the world. My gift is lighting the way for those who are meant to be lighting the way for others. And I love to help you do this. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Kellum of Kinetic Leadership Consulting, where he helps people and companies apply kinetic leadership and lead space awareness. What is that? I'm going to let him tell you. Dr. Kellum, thank you so much for being with me on Conversations Worth Your While. I would love if you would expand a little bit on who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and why it matters.
Linda, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm thrilled to be with you. I started Kinetic Leadership Consulting after retiring from the Air Force after 27 years. I served both as an enlisted and officer. And employing weapon systems, it's all about putting your energy in the right places. So I think the true weapon is our leaders, our everyday leaders that put their energy in leading not only themselves, but their teams and organizations. So developing lead space awareness, I get to share the research I did on executive leadership. I did a qualitative exploratory study, which is a fancy way of saying I got to talk to some really interesting people, approximately 100 years of executive leadership experience, coming up with the kinetic leadership model.
I love that. It's always nice that people, sometimes I think I just make stuff up, but you actually have done this research and, put it together. Like, my favorite way of gathering information is give me the cliff notes. That's what I want. I want the cliff notes, or spark notes, whatever they call them nowadays.
Yeah.
I want to know, like, you do the research and then tell me what you found. So I'm so glad to have you here today with us so that we can talk a little bit more about leadership, but in a way that is been proven through your research. So, okay, so the first thing we're going to touch on is there's this widely accepted practice of fitting the leadership style with the situation, right? But I know you're taking it one step further, and that you said there's actually a phenomenon that can be applied by every leader in every situation, that they can start right now, which we're going to get to because that's the drum roll. Wait for it at the end, right? But tell me about your fascination with leadership. How did it start? And what did you kind of learn along the way?
So Linda, I found myself being a student of leadership, kind of looking back at, after I retired, and some of the first professional military education courses that you go to, you learn different leadership styles. And that situational leader, I was fascinated with the one that you kind of mentioned, to where if you're working with someone who's an expert in an area, but you're being very directive to them on how that style is really not going to work. Your competency level is so high, maybe you don't need so much hands-on. So just that very short example, I was blown away. I was like, okay, it's not just trial by error. It's not just, okay, I was born with certain capabilities that maybe I'm an extrovert, or, I like to get out there and find, the answers on my own and dig around and get dirty. So that was the first time I really leaned into learning a little bit more about the leadership as a phenomenon. And when I say phenomenon, I think of it as I've seen successful leaders be put in a different situation and not succeed, and us be kind of like, wow, I kind of thought that was going to go a little bit better. We've also seen junior, leaders, someone that's just in basic training. Well, it's your turn to lead, follow, or get out of the way. So you're put in leadership situations, and I thought, why is that so? How can someone new go into a complex, chaotic environment and succeed? And they don't have all this training, but what they do bring with them, which we'll talk about a little bit later, are their own knowledge, skills, and abilities that they may have been born with, they may have been shaped with. But that to me is it's fascinating. It's fascinating to me how one person you can say the exact same thing that someone else said, but it can truly resonate with the
Mm-hmm.
team or the organization. So
Mm-hmm.
after my research and after looking abroad, I was like, as an intel weapons officer, I remember thinking, hey, this is, what is agnostic to the situation? What can I give you that's not just going to work for one situation, but it's going to build your situational awareness over all of them? And that's where I developed lead space awareness.
Hmm. I find this very interesting. So I have two sons in the military, both in the
Mm,
Marine Corps. One actually is finished with his active duty. He's in reserves now. And if I ask them, what is the leadership style in the Marine Corps, he will say, it's yelling and belittling. That is the leadership style. That's from, it didn't end in boot camp. And no matter how high I get promoted, there's always someone higher yelling and
yeah.
belittling me. So, his leadership style, as far as what they're saying, is nothing like the research that I know you've done.
Mhm.
Yet, what's interesting is they, even if they're not always in a leadership position, there are times in their days where they do need to be a leader. So, what we're going to talk about today isn't just for people who hold leadership positions, because we might just be put the lead on a project sometime, or we're, in a family situation as well, right? Like, I
Mhm.
have two sisters, right? And when it comes to our aging parents, one of us has to step up and take the lead on the medical stuff. Another one takes the lead on something else. So there's always times in our lives where we need to take the lead. So
Yeah.
if there's a way that there's like, there's something I can do that's effective all the time, like, I'm gonna finish listening to this
Yeah.
webcast. I gotta know what this is. Right?
And I'm excited to share it with everyone, and it resonates through not just the organizations, just like different disciplines and different, industries. But I remember being at the whiteboard, when I first came up with this, or just really had that, I won't call it an aha moment, but things are really coming together. And then you try to stamp it or apply it, and you're like, hey, this is really working. I was talking to my nephew, and he was like, wow, so you mean like this? And he started like applying it to, his industry and how they think. And I was like, exactly. Sometimes whenever I kind of get stuck in, I'll get stuck in a creative rut sometimes, and I want to do this or do that. I was like, well, wait a minute. Let me use my own lead space awareness. Let me develop this. I'm going to use my own tool, and okay, aha,
Uh-huh.
this is something I'm lacking and I want to do more of.
Right. Nice. I like that you catch yourself. I do that too as a coach. We call it walking your talk. If you're like, "Oh
Yeah.
crap. I found something in my own way. I'm going to need to get out of my own way." And then we call it walking the talk. So,
Yeah.
all right, good. Beautiful. So, okay, so let's move on to like leaders. Are leaders born or are they made? Do we have to be a natural leader? I know natural leaders. I admire them. And one of my favorite, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's a quote. And it says, and I don't know who said it. I really should look this up. But it said, um, if you want people to help you build a ship, make them love the sea.
Okay. I'm picking
Because
up
they're
what you're
not going
putting
to
down. I
love
get it.
building a ship. There's
Right.
nothing
Right.
fun about
Yeah.
building a ship. It's the why. Why are we building a ship? Because I
Make them love
love the
floating. Yeah.
sea. I want to get out. I want to go explore the world. I want to get on this ship and go out there, right?
Right.
That's how you, right? So that is like something we can do as leaders, right,
Hmm.
as well. And and that's something that I believe can be learned. I think leadership can be developed. Tell me what you've discovered in your research and what you think about this topic.
Linda, that's really big. The development word that you throw out there, the born versus made. Not to be funny, but you can't be made unless you're born. So we can just set that aside. And yes, we're all born with certain, skills and abilities, But to your point, a lot of these were ones that were developed from either our parents or our peers and things. So it's both, but I lean more towards the leadership development. As you say that, and you tell me about your boys, I remember I'm thinking of a case study. There were these identical twins, and they were both given the same problem. And then one, they're brilliant twins. You know, they were very capable. One went over here and figured everything out for themselves. The other went to the field and talked to people who were doing, and got some people who didn't agree with them. So I would ask you, who do you think had the better product? But you kind of see where I'm going with there.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it reminds me of one of my participants during the study that in today's environment, you know, there's no problem that there's not a co-production of solutions. You know, just you and I speaking today, we come from very different walks of life. When I say leadership, we think, you know, born or made, we think different things, but we could come together and see where we're in violent agreement, where we need more of and what we need less of. So leadership development to me is the key for every person, every organization, every team. If we're not consistent, you know, we all agree that if you're not consistently learning, then we're not getting better, then we're slowly, you know, retrograde, if you will. So my question to those who are maybe watching this video and going, I'm on top. I'm the executive. I am executive leadership. You know, that person, and whether they're a CFO, CLO, CI. So my question to them would be like, well, when you got to the top, how did you start developing your people? How did you teach the knowledge, skills, and abilities, whether your own capabilities or where your perspective of how to approach, you know, the organization? How did you do that? Are you building more executives? Are you building more effective leaders? So
Mm-hmm.
I could go on and on. I love that I think developing your leaders is the greatest return on investment that anybody can do for themselves, their team, or their organization. So when you open with that, you got me fired up, Linda. When you open with the situational leadership thing, what we're preparing for with kinetic leadership model and building your lead space awareness is we're preparing you for when that unknown thing happens, when that bolt from the blue, when that black swan happens, and you're like, hey, we were never prepared for this, or we've never seen this before. So you can go back into your lessons learned, and you know, a lot of the after actions, you know, throw in the term that you're in. Every organization has that, hey, if you don't fill out the black and white paperwork, you know, it didn't happen, so that we can build on those learning points. That is the absolute biggest takeaway.
Mm. So I love a couple of things that you brought up. First of all, I love that you brought up that leaders don't act alone. Leadership isn't a singular role at all. Um, you know, in order to be an effective leader, there these relationships and bringing in, you know, a collective, and that the collective expertise and all the different styles that the people bring to the table. When you consider all of that, that's an important piece of being an effective leader. And then the second thing that you brought up, which is also very beautiful, is just because you've risen to the top doesn't mean you're done. So that all these things that you learned that have made you a more effective leader, then to pass those on, because that's for the good of not just the good of the person or the team or the organization, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, in everywhere. Because no, I always say, you know, who we are, is this as individuals, is we bring that everywhere we go. So if we're an effective leader in our jobs, we're also a better effective leader at home. When it's our turn to take the lead, doesn't mean we're the boss. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like, I
Yeah.
mean, well, I might be the boss of my house,
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah.
not true. Anyway, but it's really, we can bring these skills into everywhere, all these different aspects of our lives. We like to think we can compartmentalize, but we really do not. We're not that good. Everything
Yeah.
is more of a horizontal layer, right? And
Well.
so, um, you know, when we're helping to develop other leaders by what we've learned, and that could be leading as a mother, right? That could be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
leading as a scout leader. That can be leading amongst your siblings when it's time to take the reins on something, right? So
Yeah.
our leadership, really, we step into these roles in and out of life, and when we're successful in one area, we can emulate that to be successful in other areas. And I love that legacy of developing other leaders, even leaders in our children, when they see how we're doing it well, right? Which
Uh,
takes us, of course, we've got to be introspective. We've got to know,
mhm.
what am I doing well? What am I not doing well? So,
And
yeah.
I love that point, Linda, in that I guess, and this is the co-production of the conversation, because I really hadn't thought about the perspective of, we've talked about it a lot, that, your professional life and your personal life can't be different, so the things of which I value and ethical codes and things, and the energy, the time and energy of which, that's where I came up with kinetic leadership model, where we put our time and energy. We have a chance and a choice every second, where we put our time and energy to figure these things out for ourselves, our family, the functionality of our teams. And that's the test that I continue to go back to, this how to, like I said earlier, this agnostic way of thinking about leadership and developing your lead space, your situational awareness. And I know you're grinning and we want to get to it, I know, because I guess what I didn't include is that, being enlisted in the Air Force, being an officer in the Air Force, regardless on all that, the entire way, I was like that kid that, well, that why? Well, I'm the kid that says, well, show me how. Okay, we did this, you did this, or you were effective at leadership. How? And that's what I went into the study, is that if I end this study and I can't say, Linda, I found an how. And you don't go in looking for that. It's truly a privilege and blessing to even come out of a grounded, research study with a grounded theory and something that people can use. I love to give back, a life of service. And if I feel like I'm not contributing, gainfully employed and making a difference, that's been my motto while serving. And that's my motto now, that I wish I would have learned these things day one. Like, why wasn't there, like when you were talking about, the yelling and everything. Well, I get the yelling, but couldn't there be a couple more bumper stickers up here to tell us?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, that would be
Oh,
beautiful. Well, we're going to share next um, something, one thing that will work for every leader in every situation. And I know what you call that is developing their lead space. If each person develops your own individual lead space, you will be able to solve challenges in every situation, no matter who you are and what your style is. And that's the beauty, is it's the word individual. So let's just talk a little bit, if you can maybe expand on what you mean by lead space.
so Linda, lead space, it's kind of a play on words, of building your situational awareness. When I was enlisted weapons director, and just as we just came back off vacation, anybody's ever taken a flight, your airplane goes to an airspace that has a linear and lateral definitions of altitude and time and space. And that's where the pilot's going to go to do their work. When I was an intel weapons officer, we developed battle space. I'm going to tell you, as the decision maker, where the bad guy is, what he's doing, how we know it. I'm going to develop your battle space. So in leadership, I wanted to, what happens? How do you develop your space as a leader to maintain your situational awareness? What are the things that you could do, very similar to altitude, speed, and boundaries of those other airspace and battle space? So what are the things, the components that you could focus on, they're going to ensure that you're able to operate at the highest of levels in any situation? So lead space awareness is about a leadership developing their situational awareness, utilizing three components for as an individual, and that's critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving. Now, these three terms are not new. I learned how to hyphenate, not hyphenate, once I went through publishing. Didn't know that. So um, critical thinking. Let me explain those three just real quick, and then we'll go into the wave tops, if you will, their application. So critical thinking and how you break down things. How do you utilize elements of reasoning? So now, the term elements of reasoning is not mine. It's the foundation of critical thinking. I love those guys. They're amazing. They have all the literature and things that you need for critical thinking. Um, but with that, you've got to put your own, not your own spin on it, but how do you bring critical thinking into your everyday kind of life? So as a military person, by acronyms, I utilize picture, to ensure that I'm either going through my business practices in a critical thinking, elements of reasoning role. And we can define picture a little bit later. Decision making, that component works well with critical thinking, and knowing, what domain are you in? Dr. Snowden's Cynefin model. Are you in the simple domain, or is this something completely different? We can't just analyze and go forward. And then the most important to me is problem solving and understanding debriefing techniques. How do we, if something that you and I planned on doing, Linda, goes horribly wrong, how do we create an authentic dialogue to where we all come in together, list out our contributing factors, and then we go, hey, this one is a debrief focal point that if we'd have fixed this one thing, I think we'd have been more successful today. So just wave tops, those three components are one of the disciplines that allows a leader to focus on their human capital, what they're doing as individuals to be critical thinkers, decision makers, and problem solvers.
Okay, so if I were going to synopsize this, I would say lead space is a mental model that an individual determines what are my individual ways of critical thinking, what are the elements of reasoning that I use when I'm critically thinking,
Mm-hmm.
what is my way of making decisions, because everybody makes decisions differently, right? And how do I usually solve problems? When you know that for yourself and you know what works for yourself in each of those three areas, now that's your where is my airspace, right? Where is my
Exactly.
lead space? That's my latitude, my longitude, my where I am in time space right now in this
Mm-hmm.
moment, right? And so those are the places to visit and to know who you are as an individual and what works for you. And this is what makes this model work for everybody in every situation. It's because it's individualized.
Mm-hmm.
So we can all read books on critical thinking. We can all read books on decision making. We can all read books on problem solving, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we know intuitively what works best for us. So I know I do not make good decisions under pressure. I know my decision making has an element of feel to it. I
Mm-hmm.
need I need to feel into things because my intuition is pretty spot on. I always like to say your gut instincts are right whether you follow them or not. They're always right. If you look back in time, you'll be like, it's true, right? So part of my decision making is checking in with my gut. That's the way I do it. That's not how everybody does it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, problem solving. Some people make a list. I don't make a list. I'm more spatial for certain problems. I was a computer programmer in a former life, and so the if then else, like that's kind of like
There's
the
a
way.
statement for it, right? There's
Yeah, I'm
output, right? Right.
always, branching off and this, so it's just the way I do it, right? And so everyone's individual and we all see people. You can even see in your own children, this one solves a problem that way, that one solves a problem this way. What's our natural abilities?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really at the center of, you know, where I start with my clients as well when I'm helping people give their gifts to the world. And I love that you're giving your gifts to the world already. It's beautiful. Um, what are my gifts, and who am I now? Because who you are
Mm-hmm.
now is not who you were 10 years ago, not
Mm-hmm.
even close. What you want now is not what you wanted 10 years ago, and maybe not what you're going to want 10 years from now. What's important to you, your values, things kind of develop and change. And we're kind of busy being who we think we're supposed to be. And so shedding that is hugely important. And those are a lot of those obstacles that can be in the way so that you don't know, how am I a critical thinker? What kind of decision making does work for me? What kind of problem solving works? When you're
Mm-hmm.
too busy trying to be everything for everybody else, you won't find these answers. So, in my business as a coach, we're shedding the obstacles that are getting in your way to
Mm-hmm.
moving forward in a way that is effective and making a difference. And that's what leaders want. They want to be effective and they want to make a difference. So if you are a leader and you find that that's kind of all mucky, how do I do this? I don't know. I'm not sure what has, it's probably there's some crap in the way and we need the crap removal service to get that out of the way,
Yeah.
so that you can discover who am I and what really works for me. How do I critically think? How do I make decisions? How do I solve problems? Right. So that
And
would be a good way of maybe synopsizing what you're saying.
oh, great job, A plus. If
Thank you.
this, yeah, if this were a class, you did very well in that critical analysis dialogue.
All right.
Very good. And it makes me think of, to your point, and that's why I love these conversations. It's not about one person. Leadership's a team sport, so we're talking about the human capital in developing your knowledge, skills, and abilities for critical thinking, decision making, problem solving. But there's another component to this to where we reach out, and it's more about the social capital. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we connect with those relationships? How do we build those roles and drive those responsibilities? And this is how the Connect leadership model works together. And it's while it's no just one thing, these things in concert, and both what the individual leader can do to sharpen their saw, if you will. Seventh habit, I believe. And and the same thing goes for learning these as a continuum. We've all learned the 7 habits of highly effective people, and
Mm-hmm.
how to make them a continuum of maturity, right? That you learn one very well, and then you learn how it works well with the others. These components are very similar from the research study, that a lot of times when talking about not just the individual leader, but a lot of times the participant during my study, when I talked about interrelationships, interagency partnerships, they changed that word to relationships. And that really struck me later going through my data, that it's I'm getting chills thinking about it. It's about those relationships. So you can be the best critical thinker, problem solver, decision maker. If you go, hey, tell me about what your other organization over here it's similar to you or completely different, what are they doing? You're like, well, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know their roles, responsibilities, relationships. Well, you can kind of see already where we're missing half the battle there.
Mm. Yeah, you know what? That piece, I love that. That's the second piece. So the first piece is identify your individual go-to frameworks in those 3 areas of critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving. And the second part is about applying by connecting those relationships and building those roles and driving responsibilities. And that second part reminds me a lot of, I don't know if you've ever read the book, I think it's called The Maestro. It's a business book.
Mm,
It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite all time leadership books I've ever read.
okay.
And it's really about a leader who sits with the maestro and makes him sit in different parts of the orchestra, different days, and then they debrief about how do you get your organization to work like an orchestra. I mean, we're all playing the same song. You can't be competing for, but you have to like, adapt and listen, even, as a person playing an instrument, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
oboist recognizes they don't know how to play the violin, and how do you get them to appreciate the other, right? And what's the job of the maestro, right? So it's a beautiful leadership book, and I would encourage you to read that. That's beautiful. But here's my question. If somebody wants to be led through this process of identifying their individual go to frameworks and how to actually apply their energy in the social and human capital, I know that you've developed a model. You call it the kinetic leadership model, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you take people through this process. Can you
I
tell me
do.
a little bit more about that?
I do. I do a 30 minutes free consultation. I call it the discovery module, if you will. And it's kind of the conversation that you and I had here now, to where a lot of times through discovery, though, you can see, well, Linda, maybe you've heard of critical thinking, but maybe we haven't gone through problem solving, in a way that can that you can grasp it and you can make it yours. So that because if you can't pick it up and really connect to the material, you're not going to use it in everyday life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It has to make sense. Well, that's a very beautiful thing to offer people. And I will put in the description how someone can go about talking with you for half an hour to actually have you, have them understand this model better and how they can use it to develop their own leadership. So thank you. That's very beautiful. So I appreciate that.
I think it's about that. I want to offer that, Linda, because it's really the application to meeting people where they're at right now. I've got a lot of examples and stories, and you and I could probably talk all day, but I don't know that specific thing that's hanging up either that existing leader that's faced with a problem, they just can't crack it, or someone who knows that tomorrow they're walking into a new challenge. Hey, Linda, you're great at this. I'm going to put you over here because I know the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you've got. And if you're looking for help, phone call away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. I love that you brought up this leadership is a team sport. That's probably a number one takeaway for people to think about. I don't have to do it alone. I won't be most effective doing it alone. So I think it's beautiful. Yeah. And even watching things like this, it's a good way to learn and develop. I love that it's developable for people. And once again, we all have to step into leadership roles here and there in our lives. Um, so I truly hope that what we've given today has been of benefit to the audience. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Caesar Kellum, for being on Conversations Worth Your While. And once again, I'm Linda Bucher, helping you to lighten your load, unleash that bigness inside of you, make an impact, and live a balanced, rewarding life. So, thank you also, our audience, for sharing your time with us today. So, please subscribe and remember to check the description where you'll find the contact info for both me and Dr. Kellum and free tools and resources that we are gifting you. And until next time, make sure that you've made this conversation worth your while by fueling the spark that it ignited.